And Carl, going back to Kamala Harris and the DNC, I do believe that it's a play not just to shore up support for the DNC, but as I say, I believe it is also to reach out to India a little bit to try to pull India into its orbit. Because remember when Donald Trump was president and he invited Modi to the United States and they went to Texas and there was a stadium full of people greeting Modi, who I might add is responsible for genocide also. People forget about this. Modi is responsible for genocide. So I think it's a two-part play, a play to shore up support for the DNC and the candidate, and I also believe it is also to try to show India, hey, look what we're doing. We're having a part Indian presidential candidate. How about you come and we will help you, because a lot of people don't know that the United States and India also has I forget what it's called, but they have an agreement where the United States can use certain bases in India and vice versa. And I think all of this is done with China on the mind. I truly believe. I think this is they are looking at China as the greatest threat because China is a power all unto itself. It is self-sufficient. It's independent. It is not buying that the stuff that the West is selling, and it is a non-white, non-Western nation that has now economically surpassed the United States, politically surpassed the United States, and with the next few months, I believe it will be militarily surpassing the United States because it will have the largest army, the largest navy, and the largest air force in the world. And I think this is freaking the power structure in the West out. What do you have to say about that, Carl?
Well, I like to say India has always been the great white hope of the Anglosphere ever since 2000, since the rise of China is on the horizon. I mean, you look at articles from The Economist, from 2000 that has been saying, oh, India is going to surpass China because India has democracy and China is this authoritarian state. They have saying the same thing for 20 years, except now they're a little bit more explicit. Now you have YouTube videos, like popular channels saying, oh, India can counter China because India owns Andaman Islands, who guard the entrance to the strategic Malacca Strait. So if India chooses, they can help the US to blockade the entrance to Malacca Strait, cut off the energy supply to China.
India secretly holds the ability to tackle China. Here's how. China's main weakness is the Strait of Malacca, because 70% of Chinese oil imports flow through this narrow passage, and India owns the entrance to the strait via the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. These islands provide a gate to the Andaman Sea, which can easily be controlled by the Indian Navy. On top of that, India will most likely align with the US if they had any conflict with China, which would effectively cut off half of China's oil and cripple them. Some experts had proposed that a way to get around this would be the Kra Canal through Thailand. But the problem with that is, it still would not be able to bypass these islands, leaving China to search for other options.
I mean, this has always been the US plan. The US plan is to they try to do they're trying to do on another version of what they did with Soviet Union in the Cold War. Nixon went to China, and US and China got together to oppose Soviet Union. So now they're like, okay, China is getting too big, but we can still work with India to counter China, because India at its present form is no threat to the U.S. hegemony. On the contrary, India in many ways complementary to the U.S. hegemony, because you have all the back offices, all the service centers that the West just outsourced to India, and the fact that Indian economy itself is not large enough to absorb all the talent that India produces. So the top echelon, the top elite tier of the Indian human capital, they come to the West. That's how we ended up with people like Kamala Harris' mom, and we have Vivek Ramaswamy's family and J.D. Vance's wife's family. They are among this elite human capital in India who left India because there's the prospect is not so great at home, so they came to the West where the opportunity is greater. So this is where kind of this the Indian elite and the U.S. elite kind of work hand in hand. That's what happened with, for example, with the Modi's financial backer, the Ambani family. Ambani recently they just throw a huge lavish wedding for their son. They invited
Yeah,
all the top tier celebrities. Kardashian was there. I think Rihanna was there,
Justin
and
Bieber.
yeah, Justin Bieber, and they give everybody like $200,000 watches who as a starter, and I mean like this all this wealth that Ambani was able to accrue, or part of it is their collaboration with Modi, their support for Modi, so they and one of the manifestations.
Kim was there for 3 days. That's big coin if you're Kim Kardashian. Because you know what Kim has that they don't have? She has wealth, sure. She doesn't have their kind of wealth. But she has wealth. She also has fame. Before Rihanna performed at their Sangeet in the spring, I had no idea who the Ambani family is. This is how you buy the West, is you hire the famous of the West. You bring them to your thing. You know, Kim Kardashian held the hands of the mother of the groom and walked the mother of the groom.
Maybe they're friends
She's
now.
never met her before. So did I judge? I judge.
Well, I was saying, like, who are we to judge? Because first of all, rich people like to hang out with other rich people.
Sure.
So Kim and her sister Chloe being there to me was a smart business move, because you may be successful in North America, but that South Asian population alone, if you're successful there, if you can sell those Skims and those good American jeans, that's another stratosphere of money. So to me, it made sense that they would find themselves there, because let's be real, they weren't the only rich people there. They were all the richest people around the world were in that room.
Was they kicked out TikTok from India, so because Ambani has ambition to dominate the Indian social media, so he worked with the Modi government to kick out TikTok on national security ground, the same ground that US is trying to ban TikTok. And then what did he do? Ambani turned around and worked with Zuckerberg.
You want to relax or want to walk around?
We want to walk.
Okay, do you have 2 hours?
We have some time.
So can I plan it accordingly? Yeah.
Sure.
Give me 1
Otherwise,
minute.
we're just gonna walk.
Let me introduce you to Susan. Susan
Hi.
is CFO of Meta.
Yeah.
Watch is fantastic.
I know. I told them already.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
I never really wanted to get a watch, but after seeing that, I was like, watches are cool.
You might want that.
Not that.
Not
but
want that one, but things like
to form a joint venture, and this is the Geo. So Geo is really like a it's a wrapper around Facebook, but this allow Ambani to cut in kind of right on the Facebook platform and have a monopoly in the social media space in India. And to do so, first had to kick out the TikTok, and also a lot of the Chinese companies, they pour a lot of investment actually in the Indian tech startups, and those Indian tech startup actually threatens monopolies like Ambani's family's holding. So they want to cut off the source of funding for this Indian tech startup. So they roll out legislation to ban Chinese investment in the Indian tech space. And so I mean you see similar things in US now. People are now complaining. Tencent have too much investment in, like, for example, in gaming. They own the Riot Games, so on and so forth. And so this is why there's kind of India at the present is more complementary to the U.S. hegemony than working counter to it. This is why they're more comfortable to work with India to counter China. Of course, eventually, if India do grow powerful enough, then U.S. then will do the same thing to India. John Mearsheimer was very explicit on his recent interview on Indian television when the host asked him, "Oh no, are we in a multipolar world? what about India? Is India also one of the great power? And John Mearsheimer told her, yes, we're in a multipolar world now, but India is not yet a great power. It's aspiring to be a great power. And by the time if China ever decline, China ever collapse or whatever, and then India takes its place to be the emerging superpower in the global south, then United States for sure would counter India just like they're countering China, because the whole point of U.S. empire logic to stay to be the top dog.
My first question to you is, what would you call the current world order? How would you describe it? Would you say it's still unipolar with America in the lead? Would you say it's truly multipolar? How would you see this?
I believe that the world today is multipolar. Most of you in the audience came of age during the unipolar moment, which ran from roughly 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, up until about 2017. And the United States was, of course, the most powerful state on the planet by far during the unipolar moment.
Where do you see India standing in this? And do you see India then as a bridging power, trying to bridge different ideological camps? Or is India just tilting things in the direction that's suited?
Well, I would say, first of all, India is an aspiring great power. The two building blocks of power in the international system are population size and wealth. You need a great deal of wealth, and you need a lot of people to qualify as a great power. The reason that China was not considered a great power until recently was because it didn't have the wealth. It certainly had the population size. What China now has is population size plus wealth. What India has for sure is population size, and it's growing wealthier and wealthier by the year. But I think, according to most accounts, it has not yet reached the point where it qualifies as a great power. Nevertheless, there is no question that India is a major power, and it is, in a very important way, caught in between those three great powers.
In the event of a conflict between India and China, do you think Russia will be forced to take a side?
I think if there were a conflict between India and China, the Russians would do everything they could to sit on the fence and to not get committed. The Russians have no interest in having bad relations with either China or India. China has not fought a war since 1979. Just think about that. The United States of America is fighting wars all the time.
There's always the possibility of conflict breaking out. If that happens, my question is, what role do you see India playing there? Because India controls the entry to the Malacca Strait. India has an agreement with the US to allow the aircraft to refuel at Indian bases. Do you think India will have a role, and will it support America militarily in a Taiwan conflict?
I think that India in that event would provide indirect support for the United States. I don't think that India would get involved in the fighting. I think if conflict broke out at a low level, the Americans would pretty much handle it by themselves, maybe with the Philippines by their side in the fight.
You've said in the past that the US foolishly fed the economic rise of China. The US is now working very closely with India. Do you foresee a potential rivalry with India in the future?
During that second half of the Cold War, we had a vested interest in helping China to get rich, because as China got rich, it helped us contain the Soviet Union. When the Cold War ended, and the Soviet Union went away, my argument is we no longer have a vested interest in helping China to get rich. Now, let's go to the India question. At this point in time, the United States has a deep-seated interest in seeing India grow wealthier and militarily more powerful, because India can help the United States contain China. India is a member of the Quad. If China develops a powerful naval projection capability into the Gulf area, India will play a key role in helping the United States deal with that scenario. So we have a vested interest in helping India grow. If, however, China at some point in the future goes the way of the Soviet Union, China breaks up, it's much weaker tomorrow than it is today, and India continues to grow more and more powerful, you can rest assured the United States will put its gun sights on India.
But for now, they feel they can play the Indian cards against China, and I'm sure like the Kamala Harris ties to India plays into that. Like Modi at one point was persona non grata in U.S. He was governor of Gujarat. He was banned explicitly from entering United States. But after he became elected, of course, the U.S. have to backtrack and give him visa. But U.S. elite has no problem with kind of the Hindu nationalism that Modi is promoting at home. Because he parallels their own. Modi's whole Modi platform is hating on the Muslims, right? And that fits you with the U.S. agenda perfectly. This is what the U.S. do. We're brothers. we can all hate Muslims together. And this is also like, this is why people are wondering why online there's a lot of support from India for Israel, because they see like Israel is a great ally on the Muslim world. And most of these people are invariably BJP supporters, because the Indian government actually have a cyber army of these trolls promoting their own domestic agendas. But a lot of the time on internet, it just looks like, they just look like trolls. It's not very effective. I think many times it runs counter what they are trying to achieve, which is for the betterment of the image of India abroad. I think you're definitely onto something there. But on the other hand, I have to putting a caveat here. India is an aspiring great power, so they see themselves as should be one of the poles in the multipolar world, and so they don't want to be like the pliant proxy to the United States. That's not their goal. Is to make themselves a great power. Their goal is not to be a servant to the U.S. empire. So they will always ultimately to work to further India's own national interest, and they have more leeway than countries like South Korea or Japan, who are militarily occupied at the moment by the U.S. military. So India will try to pursue an independent strategy. This is why they still reselling Russian oil to Europe. A lot people, the imports of Russian oil and gas to India has skyrocketed in the past 2 years. And then if you look at the India's export of oil and gas to Europe, it also skyrocketed. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's going on. And U.S. had chose largely looking the other way, because they still need, even though U.S. does not like it, U.S. have been publicly lecturing Indian diplomats in public all the time about they shouldn't work with Russia. But behind the closed door, they cut the India some slack, because they still need India on board of their China containment project. So this is what's going on. Like
India geopolitically has a unique position which no one else has. It is the only country with the heft, with the combination of population, economic size, military power, technology, that can make the difference. If India sides with the West against China, China and Russia lose. If India chooses to align itself with China and Russia, the West would struggle. Only India has that big swing factor. India matters. And because India matters to an extent that no other country matters, not Indonesia, not Vietnam, not Brazil, not South Africa, only India has that heft, nuclear power, everything, right? So whether America likes it or not, America has to cut India a lot of slack. India gets away with continuing to buy stuff from Russia. India gets away with relations with Iran because the pragmatic Americans, when they are pragmatic, they realize that you have to keep India on side. No choice. Right? So I think India has been quite good, the Jaishankar, at leveraging of that unique position.
But India, they're still trying to profit from like the U.S.-China competition. It's like, okay, well, if we play our cards right, maybe we'll get more advanced tech transfer from United States, more investment from U.S. But we will continue to get cheap Russian oil because we're not gonna. I mean, they're depending on that. So they are kind of uncomfortable ally for Washington. They're not 100% pliant because they have their own interests, but for it just they have a convergent interest when it comes to China.
Mm-hmm. And I think that India has never gotten over the fact that prior to the '62 war, that they were in a slightly better economic position than China, and China not only surpassed them, they ran laps around them and built up industry, and they become an independent power. And on top of that, they lost the '62 war. I mean, by a huge margin, and they can't get that out of their psyche. But it's crazy because they will work with the United States and they will work with the UK, and the UK colonized them and stole trillions of dollars from their economy, and they can get over that, but they can't make amends with a neighbor that you can't pick China up and put it somewhere else. They're your neighbor. It seems like to me they would be dashing to try to find a solution to the border crisis so that their economy can prosper, because a lot of people don't. China is India's largest trade partner. China also supplies almost all of the components that India uses to make drugs to sell to the rest of the world. So, and China is a huge investor in tech companies and infrastructure in India. So it would behoove the Indians to think rational and pull back from the hurt feelings of '62 and to work with their neighbor instead of plotting and planning with the United States, which they see everybody that gets close to the United States, what happens to them and what Britain did to them. And do they ever just sit back and say, hey, the reason we had this spat with China is because we were occupied and they just left, and they left this McMahon line that China never accepted, and China told them that they never accepted it. I mean, to me, they are in a self-defeating circle if they do not analyze this the way it should be. What do you have to say about that, Carl?
So I just recently read an article. I forgot whether Economist or FT. I have to dig it up, but the gist of it is saying right now the Indian business community actually want Modi government to tone down the anti-China rhetoric because they want to do business with China. They see much more potential for growth with Chinese investment, with Chinese trade, and they don't want the border tensions to impact their business. Whereas the Indian public is going the other way because Indian media has been manipulating the news for decades. Now, a lot of the Indian public want Modi to go even more hardline because 70% of the Indians public right now surveyed say they believe India could win a war against China. That's how much brainwashing their media have been, playing tricks on them because they're not telling them the truth. I mean, because a lot of people, especially India has 1.4 billion people. There's a lot of many people who travel outside India. They're cosmopolitan. They're worldwide, and many of them have traveled to China. They have seen China firsthand, and they understand how everything is. But for the vast majority of the people in the country whose only exposure to China, to the outside world, is through their media. I mean, this is kind of like United States, actually. If you think the same argument can be said about United States, a lot of the people in U.S. they just don't know how it is. Only news they receive about China is from their very biased media, which completely manipulate the news, presenting a bizarre world of picture to the public. So the public's been led to believe that India could defeat China in wars. That's why India should be tougher on China than it currently is. And so this is but Modi government is not a neutral party in this, because they're the ones who are instilling this belief in the public. They are the one who misleading the public. They're the one who's stoking nationalism in India. It's like the fundamental issue between India and China is it's a border issue. It's a border conflict that was a legacy of British colonialism.
Yes.
And it's something that could be easily solved by two sides sitting down and hammer out the border, like China has done with the other countries that's bordering China. I mean, China's had when People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, inherited border dispute all around its border. In the north, in the south, in the west, with everybody. But by 2000, China have settled all its land border dispute. I mean, China still have maritime border dispute in South China Sea and East China Sea, but on land, with all the countries border China on land, China have settled all the land border dispute, with the exception of India and Bhutan. And the case of Bhutan is because Bhutan's foreign policy is
run by India.
being controlled by India. So you see the common denominator here. There's a common denominator here. And China settled its border with Burma, with Vietnam, with Laos, with Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, Nepal. China settled its border with everybody except Russia. India is the last one that's holding out, because India feels like we don't need to negotiate. We just tell you where the border is. You just accept it. But that's not how it works in negotiation. Negotiation is give and take. You can't just dictate. And so this is the border issue is one. But I think you are also right. Another point about this competition, so to speak, is the defeat in the war in 1962, and also the China's economic takeoff. Because I grew up in China in 1980s, and I remember back in 80s, the GDP per capita in India and China about the same. Sometimes some years India even pull ahead. If the monsoon was really good that year, the India GDP per capita actually pulls ahead. It's only until 1990, after 1990, when the Chinese economy really took off, and then you never look back. And this is what I like to say is India actually have respectable GDP growth numbers. It actually is doing better than many other countries in the developing world, in the global south. But unfortunately, they always compare India with China, which does not make India look good. That's the problem. If you compare India's growth numbers to other countries in the global south, it's respectable. India has been posting high growth numbers year after year. But when stack against China, it's kind of magnitude difference. I think this is why, especially a lot of the people among the Indian elite, this is kind of hit on their ego. This hits the ego, because it's like, we used to be the same neck to neck with China, and then Chinese economy is now 5 times the size of India. I mean, it's a big change in the last this happened in the last 30 years. And so this is a problem. This is a hard problem to solve, because as long as I'm tying back to U.S. again. Remember what Putin said about U.S. Putin says the problem with the U.S. is the mentality of hegemony. Unless the U.S. elite gave up on this hegemonic mindset, no matter who is a president, nothing is going to change. Well, with India, it's very similar when it comes to China. They kind of have to, they kind of have to give up this mentality that somehow they're superior than China. They should be better than China. They just work with China. Like there's no, both countries can profit and grow together. I mean, like they have to step away from like some kind of zero sum mentality, like your loss is my gain, whereas to the one where hey, we can both gain, we can both profit as long as there's peace, stability, and growth, and we can both grow our economy together and engage in trade. And right now, even despite Modi's rhetoric toward China, the Indian-China trade is still growing. It's already like China is already India's largest trading partner. It's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. They're just trying to limit now. They're just putting all kind of limit, clamping down on the China trade, but it's still growing because the Indian businessmen see opportunities in trade with China. That's why they want the government to just cool off a little bit, just like cool off the temperature a little bit. But India, there's a lot of things at play because Modi, his party need to stoke the public sentiment. He need to stoke the nationalism in India to stay in power. Like he got to show I'm the tough guy. I can put China in its place, and I am now aligned with United States. We're going places. That's how he's selling the message to the public. So this is going to be a persistent issue for foreseeable future. I'm afraid. I mean, it's really unfortunate because China and India working together have so much more potential. Together they compose, like almost almost half of the world's humanity. Like between China
almost
and India
3 billion
together.
people.
Yeah.
And Carl, we also forgot about Nikki Haley. Another U.S. Indian elite. And also remember that there were British holdovers that are in power. Just like in Pakistan, they're in power in India. And my friend here, shout out to Mr. Freeze, Lord Freeze. That's my guy. I actually know him personally. That's my high school friend all the way up. And he says, question: why hasn't India broken away from the U.S. like China broke away from the British to become independent in terms of the economy and the infrastructure?
This is a very good question because India, they try to go on their own, after independence. This is why they kind of lean towards Soviet Union. And Nehru talked about building a socialist economy in India. But what happened is that got kind of mired down in bureaucracy and corruption. And then in 1991, that's when India decided to make a big reform. And when they talk about reform, it's they're opening the market, but the way they did it is kind of a turn toward liberalized economy. But we're talking about the liberal free market economy. But they're doing it with Indian characteristics. So they're not completely open. There's still a lot of restrictions on foreign capitals entering into India, for example, because they want to protect domestic industry correctly. Well, that's a correct instinct, but there's still a lot of red tape. So what ended up happening is India economy, even though they opened up and even though they still have a lot of protections, it became more and more dependent on the West. If you look at service sector, for example, that's one of this big growth sector in India that everybody talk how wonderful it is, the growth industry, the software, etc. But if you look at these industries, most of them depend on the West. Because they have the Western country outsource their IT their IT needs to India. That's what all the back office work, all the service centers, that kind of stuff. I mean, but they haven't had. I mean, maybe this will still happen, but there needs to be like a homegrown Indian solution for Indian economy. Like this is what China did. China built a great firewall. So no Zuckerberg. And you know what happened past week? That CrowdStrike, that very shady cybersecurity firm, pushed a forced security update on a Friday that brought down the world's IT infrastructure, including India, US, Europe, you name it. All the airlines were paralyzed because their windows just froze. They got the big blue screen of death. And this had no impact in China because China, they're not running that software. They're not, you know, even if they do have Windows, they're not using the CrowdStrike. You know, they're not using CrowdStrike as a cybersecurity for antivirus.